Good morning, everyone. Sherry here, and today I thought I would share with you the making of the Lark tee by Grainline Studios. This is my favorite t-shirt pattern. You can make it with a scoop neck, a V-neck, a boat neck, cap sleeve, short sleeve, three-quarter sleeve, long sleeve. Possibilities are endless. It's only 5 pattern pieces, a back, a front, 2 sleeves, and a neckband. And if you have a serger, it just makes constructing this so fast and easy. What I wanted to share with you too is I made a few alterations to my particular pattern. I wanted the scoop neck, but I found that the scoop neck in my size was a little bit low for me. So here's my front piece, and I'm going to take the pattern piece away from the fabric so maybe you can see this a little better. So if you look here at my neckline, maybe you can see that this line here is the original neckline. It was too low for me. So to alter this for my liking, I actually traced the pattern at the next largest size only in this area, and this brought the neckline up probably about an inch. I also shortened my pattern. You have a lengthen or shorten line here. Shortened it by 3 inches. They don't really explain to you in the pattern how to do this. The way that I did it was I have the same line on the front and back pattern piece. Can't tell if you, yeah, there you can. There's the same line on the front and the back pattern piece. I lined those up. I made sure my underarm seams matched, and then I marked off 3 inches and just turned it under and taped it. But you do want to make sure that this and this match on front and back. Last alteration I made was, no, it's not the last, but you can see this t-shirt has some shape to it. Well, as you've heard me say before, I'm old and I have a muffin top now. I don't have the hourglass figure anymore. And so what I did was I laid a ruler, lined my ruler up here, and at that point, and just cut straight up. I really like a straight tee as opposed to a fitted tee. And the last thing we need to do is we need to adjust our neckband. Okay, here we have our neckband that we cut on the fold. But because I made this adjustment here, I have to make this one smaller by the same amount. So I just measured here, put the marking here, and fold it under, and then cut it out. Easy peasy. So if your scoop neck is too big for you, this was my remedy, and it worked for me. I don't know if it's the correct thing to do. That's what I did, and it worked. Okay, so with that said, let's get started. I'm going to take my front and back, and the first thing that I'm going to do is line up my shoulder seams. And because I have this space here, it gets a little tricky for me. But the way I get around that is I do some extra pinning. So I'm going to lay my front shoulder seam, my back shoulder seam together. with right sides together. And I'm lining up the armhole edge. This edge of the back is going to stick out a little. And that's okay because that's part of the seam allowance. And I am a pinner, so what should take about 30 minutes is going to take a little longer with me explaining and the pinning. Okay, there's one. And this particular knit is slick and it likes to move. And I may speed parts of this up so I don't bore you guys to death. Okay. Now because this is slick and it likes to move, and the fact that I have this empty space here, I'm actually going to put a couple of extra pins down in this area so it will hold everything together further down, and I'm not going to risk this slipping around on me even when it falls down in the hole. And I would also probably be pinning over on my cutting table if I weren't trying to share the process. Okay. I'm using my Baby Lock serger, and I also, because this is slick, had to put a Teflon foot on. The other foot was not feeding well. And I'm just doing like a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay. Now we have front to back. Ta-da. Next thing we're going to do is we are going to put in our sleeves. So you have markings on your sleeve. You have a center mark, which you want to mark when you cut out. So you're going to line that up with the shoulder seam here. 2 marks on one side, 1 mark on the other. This is the back. 1 mark equals the front. I did alter this as well. I turned this up about 3/4 of an inch. This is the regular short sleeve. It too was just a wee tad long. So I'm going to find, this is the back. Let's see what this one is. This is the other one. Give me this one. Okay. So we're going to pin right sides to right sides. I'm going to find my center. I push my seam over towards the back. Find my center. And pin. You could also clip. Then I'm going to come and I'm going to find the 2 notches. And the 2 notches here. I'm going to line these up. And then I'm going to line up the bottom. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to find the 1 notch because we're on the front now. That notch is here. It's so slick, my hands are, excuse me, my hands are so dry, I can't get it lined up. And I'm going to line up the bottom. I'm going to try some clips to see if that goes a little faster. Okay, so I have everything lined up with all their notches. So what you're going to do now is you're just going to kind of work everything else in all the way around. You may have to stretch the front and back of the shirt the slightest little bit to work in the excess on the sleeve. That's okay. That's the beauty of sewing with the knit. It's slick. Runaway clip. Okay. So like before, I'm going to lay this out a little bit. And try to flatten it out. Put myself a few pins down in here just to kind of help hold the two pieces together. Normally this is not necessary. This is just in my particular situation at the moment with how I'm trying to do this here. Like I said, I would be standing up over it at my cutting table. Which I think I'm going to end up going over there anyway. So I'll be right back. Okay, I saved you that agony. I have them all pinned up. I did them both. And so now we're just going to sew them together. We're going to go from one side all the way to the other. 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to do the same thing on both sleeves. Take out my extra pins that I was using just to kind of keep everything from slipping around. And we have a beautiful seam, no puckers. Turn it over, check, no pleats, no puckers. And we have one sleeve in. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, sew it in, and then I'll be back. Okay, I have both sleeves in now. One on each side. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put right sides to right sides, and we're going to sew up our side seams. So we're going to take our underarm seams here at the sleeves, and we are going to match those up. I like to turn one seam one way and one the other. So I generally will turn the back one up and the front one down. And I'm going to pin here. We're going to pin at the bottom of the sleeve. Then we're going to match up the bottom of the shirt. Line those up. Give that a pin. Now some people can do this without pinning. I don't do garments enough to have the confidence to do that. So I'm going to pin, clip, pin, whatever you prefer. Again, you could, continue clipping all the way down. Make sure everything's lined up. And I'm going to put some extra pins in there, about 3 to 4 inches away from the edge, just to keep my layers from slipping. And again, I'm only doing this because of the tight knit it is, and because I don't have a filler piece for my table, not for the serger anyway. The piece that I do have accommodates my sewing machine. Alright, so now we're just going to come over here. We're going to stitch all the way down the side. Add a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Get that tail around here. Just like we did on everything else. One side seam done. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. There it is. Oh. Alright, we are almost done. We have a shirt. The wrong side. Let's turn it inside out. See what we have. Or right side out, I should say. Pretty, pretty. Okay, so the next thing we have to do is we need to do our neckband, and then we need to hem our sleeves and our bottom. So what you want to do for your neckband is you need to divide it into quarters. Your shoulder seams are not halfway because this is lower than the back. This is like a third and this is like 2/3. So you have to find the center of the sides. So what I do is I take my center front notch and I pull it up to my center back notch. And then I pull this out. I'm not stretching it. I'm just pulling it out and lining up the top as best I can. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect, but you know, you want to get close. So this for me is going to be my quarter for this side. And you can see how far that is from the actual shoulder seam. So I'm going to put a pin here. That's going to mark that one. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And I'm going to line it up. Try not to stretch. And get close. You can see we're about the same distance as we were over here. And I'm going to mark that. Just going to put a pin in it. Now we have our 4/4 marks. Here, 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 and here. So what we need to do with our neckband is, first thing we need to do is we need to sew the ends together. So this is a quick sew here. So fold it. We're going to do 1/4 inch seam straight across to connect it. Okay. And I'm going to chop these tails off a little bit. Okay. Then we are going to turn it right side out, and we need to fold and iron in half. So here, when I fold this, I like to twist the seam. Turn one side one way, one side the other, and then fold. It does reduce a little bit of bulk there in that area. Okay, now I'm going to go to the iron, and I'm going to iron this in half all the way around. Okay, now that I've ironed it in half, we are going to find the 4 points on the neckband. So I'm going to try to somewhat center my seam up with the back side. So I want to try to get about the same amount on each side of that seam. And you could probably do this a little better if you were sitting at a cutting mat where you have measurements. I'm just kind of eyeballing that. I'm going to put a pin on this end. Actually, what you should do, I don't know where my brain is. This morning I haven't finished my coffee yet, and I got to go to work in a minute. So I'm going to pull from the seam to here. Duh. I'm going to mark here. Then I'm going to match up my pin with my seam, and I'm going to put a pin on each end. There. And over here. Okay, so now I have my 4 points that I can now line up to my neckline. So I'm going to line up the center back. And clip. Then I'm going to pull it around, line up my center front, this stuff is so slick. Okay, I'm lining up my center front. Then I'm going to line up the one that we put here, just beyond the shoulder seam. I'm going to line these 2 pins up and clip there. Come on. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Make sure you don't get this twisted. Okay. Gonna line up those 2 pins. And so now you have something that looks kind of like this. And what you're going to have to do, the back is going to fit in a little easier than the front. The front, because it scoops, it's bigger, you're going to have to stretch the band a little to make it fit. It's not going to be a lot of stretch. But you kind of see here, you got a little extra neck edge than you do band. That's okay, just a little slight tug and get it in. So go ahead and finish pinning all the way around, and then we'll sew. Alright, it is the next day. I had to go to work, didn't have time to come back. So I have my neck band all clipped on. And now we're just going to do a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around. And I'm going to start here just before the center back seam. Hopefully, I'm going to get rid of that clip and slide everything up under, foot down, and then kind of come in. Actually, I'm going to try to come in a little bit of at an angle. And keep everything lined up as best you can. Just remember that you may have to stretch your neckband just a slight little bit to fit the opening. You might have to help it over the hump. There we go. I'm going to go slow and just keep making sure I have everything lined up nice and even. Okay, so I'm almost to the end, and I'm just going to come forward until I meet up where I actually came in at that 1/4 inch. And then I'm just going to turn my fabric to the side and sew off. Not perfect, but we'll take care of that tail in a little bit. So now you have a nice narrow, well, let me grab the shoulder seams. Nice narrow neckband. And then what we're going to do a little bit later is we're going to come in and we're going to top stitch right along here. That will keep that folded down and the neckband standing up nicely. 2 more things to do. We need to hem our sleeves and our bottom. I'm going to do that on the serger. I'm going to convert it over to cover stitch, and then we will get out the sewing machine and we will do the top stitching. I'm going to turn this under 3/4 inch, pin all the way around, iron and pin, and then for the bottom I'm going to turn it under 1 inch and iron and pin it, and I'll be back. Okay, I've taken my shirt over to the ironing board, And I've turned up my hem on my sleeves 3/4 of an inch. And I have pinned it. And I've done my hem at 1 inch and pinned it. I set my machine up for a cover stitch. And I did go ahead and stitch one sleeve off camera just to make sure I had my settings and everything. Okay. I'm also using my fabric guide here. So now all we're going to do is we are going to slide our sleeve up under the presser foot. And I'm lining the edge up with my seam guide here. And I'm going to remove a couple of pins. Normally I start near the underarm seam, but not right on it. Actually, I do want to move it up just a smidgen. Take out some of my pins, kind of adjust everything, and then off we go. I'm going to stop and rotate my fabric. Stop again, keep rotating, and remove some of the pins. You could definitely do this with a double needle on the sewing machine, but I have the cover stitch capability, so I'm going to take full advantage of that. Rotate one more time. And we're almost there. And you do want to make sure you keep everything away underneath. And since these lock in when you start, when you're doing the cover stitch, I am going to go ahead and trim those off so I don't have a big jumbled mess and have to deal with that later. I'm going to go beyond my stop point, about 1/4 of an inch to a 1/2 inch. And then I'm going to turn my hand wheel forward to raise my needles all the way up. And then to release the thread from the looper, I'm going to go 1 full rotation backwards. That releases the thread from the looper, and then I'm going to bring my foot up and I am gently going to pull this, and then I'm going to grab the threads and pull. And now you see we have a nice hem all the way around, but what we want to do is the least little bit of tugging on these threads is gonna cause it to start coming loose. So I'm gonna come down here to my stop point, and I'm gonna thread my needle through, not my needle, my pin, through a couple of those loops, and then I will pull these threads to the back, tie them off, and bury them. So now I'm on to the hem. I'm going to start at a side seam or thereabouts. And I am going to move over my fabric guide. Get that started. And you can kind of feel where the edge of your fabric is underneath. And you want to line it up with the markings on your foot. And I think I may have gone just a smidgen too far, so I'll move that over a little. Get up close to my seam, but not on it. And we'll start the same process and go all the way around. Again, I'm going to trim these threads right here. Come beyond, rotate forward, needles up, one full rotation backwards. It releases the loopers, or the looper. I'm going to grab those threads. I'm pinching really hard here. Then I'm going to turn it around and come in here again, place a pin so this does not come undone. And there we have a very nice hem on the bottom. Okay, the last thing we're going to do is we need to top stitch around the neck edge. So I've set my sewing machine up with my edge stitch foot. I use a Bernina. That is the 10D. I'm using the dual feed. And I have moved my needle over to the left for positions. And I'm just lining up this little guide right here, right at that seam line where the neck band attaches to the shirt. And I have set my stitch length to 3. I'm just going to sew around the entire neckline using this guide. And I'm going to adjust along the way. Make sure that you're holding your seam down. You want it going towards the shirt. And this fabric is really slippery. You want to try not to get any little puckers or anything in the fabric. You could change your foot pressure a little bit, which I think I am, to see if that kind of helps feed everything. It's so slick. And I'm just going to keep following around the edge of that neckband. Okay, and we are right back to where we started. I'm going to do a little back stitch and cut. Trim off my threads. And we are done. So now we have a nice little shirt to wear. All we have to do now is pull these to the back and tie them off. And again, the adjustments that I made to this pattern is not the correct way to do it, but it is what works for me. You may want to explore grading out the pattern from one size to the other based on your measurements. But I have found that I don't like fitted shirts, so the way that I adjusted mine works for me. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you're inspired to go make a t-shirt. They are very simple. Once you get it, it's so quick. You can do one in a matter of minutes. Thanks for joining and have a great day. See you again soon. Bye now.